days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. And we got good news in San Francisco. The 49ers are in the works and finalizing a deal with the Philadelphia Eagles to trade for defensive end Bryce Huff. And the 49ers have definitely been remaking this defensive line group. And when you talk about players potentially that moved on, a guy like Leonard Floyd, and how do you replace Leonard Floyd's production? Well, this right here does it. You've added Mikael Williams now and Bryce Huff, presumably. Now, this deal is not official. It's going to become official after June 1. There's a lot of salary implications for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's why they're moving on from Bryce Huff, a offseason signing in 2024 that just hasn't worked out. 3 years, $51 million when he comes over from the New York Jets to the Philadelphia Eagles. Guess who he played for with the Jets was Robert Saleh. So familiar face ends up in San Francisco playing for the 49ers again. The 49ers add depth at the position. They add a stud at the position. And it's not going to cost a lot either. So this is a big-time move for the San Francisco 49ers. And yes, this is a guy that produced really big in one season. And the rest of the seasons have been average. But this is a guy that showed the potential. And we've talked about this in extent, is we have to trust Robert Saleh. And the fact that Robert Saleh drafted this guy and then got them, actually he didn't draft him. He got there, he was there. But a guy that he got the most out of, I think is going to be one of the things that we love about this overall pickup, because it changes the depth along the defensive end position, which I'm excited to get into. So I'm going to talk about all that in this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you listen and you like it, please give it a 5-star rating. I really appreciate it. And if you were going to bet with BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action, the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With a large selection of odds on everything from the Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So let's get into the specifics of what happened with this trade. And this is reported to Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter reported this early in the day today that the 49ers were going to add Bryce Huff for a mid-round pick. So we are not aware right now, as of time of recording, what the compensation is going to be. Now, usually when you hear mid-round pick, you're thinking somewhere between 4 and 6 would be a mid-round. But a lot of times teams will do pick swaps. So teams just, jump up, 30 or so picks, and then you get, the pick behind. So there could be a lot of different things that happen with this. But the big news is that this is going to reunite Bryce Huff with Robert Saleh in San Francisco. So the trade cannot be processed until after June 1. Both sides are working to make it happen, and Bryce Huff has already reworked his contract to help facilitate the trade and go to San Francisco. So this is something that Bryce Huff wants to happen. He wants to get out of Philadelphia and into San Francisco, which is crazy considering he just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, his change in the amount of opportunities he got, the change in scheme definitely didn't work out there. So that's something to remember. But the 49ers are adding a veteran player who's got a lot of ability. And let's talk about that money a little bit and the cap specifics of the deal. And this is coming from Field Yates. Field Yates, responded with the cap essentials that we need to know. The Eagles declined Bryce Huff's $15.58 million full and guaranteed option bonus, which turned into a base salary. They then turned $9 6.05 of that base salary into signing bonus, which allows the 49ers to take on the remaining 7.95. So that money became a base salary. Then they turned $9 million of it and restructured his deal to turn that into a signing bonus, which they can then spread out amongst the length of the contract and free up cap space, which was a big reason why the Philadelphia Eagles did this. We know this is one of the names of the game, but also it made it so the 49ers didn't take on a lot of cap money either. Even though they wanted to add a player, they wanted to add an edge defender that could help this football team, they are doing their best to be diligent to make sure that they don't add too much salary, because they are still trying to, yes, build a team that can win now, but is, poised for longevity. And we've seen them free up money. They want to have cap space to roll over. And this is one of those moves that's a win-win for the 49ers. Number one, it doesn't cost a lot. Number two, you're getting a player that was highly productive when he played for Robert Saleh. We'll get into those numbers in a second. But this is a guy that has a lot of talent, and he's played within the scheme, so he knows how to play in Robert Saleh's scheme. He already understands it. So, in sum, the Eagles save $7.95 million in cash and create $15 million in 2025 cap space. The 49ers inherit the final 2 years of Huff's deal, owing him $7.95 million in cap and cash for this year. So you've got a big-time player, a guy that you feel can get 10-plus sacks for your football team, rushing opposite of Nick Bosa, and you are going to pay that player $7.95 million. Phenomenal. Not just that, but it's not a one-year deal, but you have 2 years worth of control over the player. So that's what it makes a mid-round pick worth it, is we already know Bryce Huff, if he was a mid-round pick, would be highly successful and considered a slam dunk. And now you're getting him, and he's a proven commodity in the NFL playing for Robert Saleh. So the 49ers, they went about this the right way. According to Adam Schefter and some of the others that I've heard talk on this matter, they said the 49ers have been trying to get Bryce Huff out of Philadelphia since free agency. So there was all the conversation about what the 49ers were going to do at edge, letting a guy go like Leonard Floyd, and, not signing a guy like Joey Bosa, not bringing in guys on the outside to rush the passer opposite of Bosa, and waiting until the draft. And the reason seems to be that they were invested in bringing over Bryce Huff, and they just had to give this time for it to materialize. Now, he wasn't a fit for Vic Fangio's defense, but Vic Fangio's defense is very much different than what Robert Saleh's defense is. And we know fit is one of the most important things. So last year, the Philadelphia Eagles decided to pivot, move on from Hassan Reddick, trading him to the Jets after they had signed Bryce Huff, who was coming off a really big year with the New York Jets, in which he had 10 sacks. So Philadelphia thought that they were getting a really good player. And think about it from this perspective. If there's one thing that Philadelphia has been phenomenal at, it has been evaluating defensive linemen. And so they thought in the process that Bryce Huff was going to be a dynamite player for them. He ended up not being as good in their system as they thought. But it doesn't mean that he's not a good player. And yes, it is a projection because he's only had the 1 year of production, which we'll go over. But that 1 year of production was really darn good for Bryce Huff. And when he played for Robert Saleh in 2023, Huff had a career-high 10 sacks, 68 pressures on just 312 pass rush snaps, the best pressure rate in the NFL at 21.8, according to Next Gen Stats. So you're getting a guy that's elite when it comes to rushing the passer. And as we were talking about the 49ers roster, and we did a deep dive into the defensive line, and we talked about the edge, and one of those concerns was when you got past Nick Bosa and Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos, you basically had to take Robert Beal Jr. and you had to take Sam Okuwanu and make one player. One guy who sets the edge well against the run, the other guy who's got a little bit more upside in pass rush, and that was going to be basically your fourth player. Well, now that doesn't have to happen. And, this is something that I've talked about extensively when people were talking about Jadeveon Clowney, is I thought Jadeveon Clowney would be a redundant player when you have Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos, especially Mikael Williams, who sets a hard edge in the run game, and has, some pass rush ability right now. He's going to develop that you have even more. But I think that they're pretty similar, Jadeveon Clowney and Mikael Williams, and the strengths that they have right now. Where you were missing was that pass rush guy, that guy that could be that D Ford type player opposite of Nick Bosa that could come finish. And that's something the 49ers have been searching for since D Ford had the back injury and had to retire. And they've tried all kinds of guys, whether that was, Samson Ebukam, bringing him in, Charles Omenihu trading for, those guys were very successful, but not to the level that D Ford presented opposite of Nick Bosa. They tried drafting Drake Jackson. That didn't work. And of course, now they're invested in Mikael Williams, which, I love. But bringing in Bryce Huff is going to change this rotation extensively. I posted on Twitter that the NASCAR package for the 49ers just changed immensely. We talked about it before. Okawanu rushing from the inside seemed pretty good to go with Gross Matos and Mikael Williams and Nick Bosa. But now it just got supercharged, right? You just hit NOS when it comes to that NASCAR unit, because now Bryce Huff and Nick Bosa can rush from the outside, and you can put Gross Matos and Mikael Williams on the inside. You talk about generating pass rush up the middle with two bigger defensive ends. Those guys are 260 plus, and they've got power and they've got natural athleticism to be able to move laterally and put some real pressure on some offensive guards. Those four alone make an offensive coordinator think he has to keep in somebody extra to block, whether that's a running back or a tight end, just with a four-man pass rush. And one of the things that made the 49ers special in the 2019 season was the amount of pressure they could put on by using just a four-man pass rush. That's what changed that defense from being good to being elite. And I think the 49ers are getting close to kind of sniffing around that. Now, you don't have all the answers when it comes to who's going to play along this defensive line on the interior. There still has to be some competition that goes along with adding these young players. But you added a key piece, because no longer now do you ask who's going to play on the outside on third down when you have to rush the passer. You know it's going to be Bosa. You know it's going to be Huff. And we've seen in Robert Saleh's system, and this is the best way to evaluate a player, is when you've seen them play in a similar system, or in this case, when you've seen someone play for that coach. And all you have to do is look at Bryce Huff's, stories on Instagram, where he is very excited about this move. First, he gave the deuces to Philly. Then he was posting up some of his highlights of playing for Saleh. He knows what this means for his career, and he knows that he supercharges this defense. And the defense does still have question marks. It doesn't solve every single problem. But what it does is it makes this defensive pass rush formidable. And whether you have the NASCAR package in there, or you just have Huff and Bosa on the outside with two interior defensive linemen that you've invested in. And let's talk about that for a second. Alfred Collins, CJ West. What are some of the things that we've talked about with these guys is they can collapse a pocket. These guys are movers. And so if you can get an internal push, and then you get the speed element from Bryce Huff and Nick Bosa on the outside, you can collapse pockets around a quarterback. So there's different ways to do this, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat. You could go the NASCAR package, which, hey, on 3rd and 12, that's phenomenal. Go get the quarterback, make it so he has to check down. That is going to work sometimes. But sometimes you just want an internal push with two guys that can win on the outside, and that's when you could leave the big dogs in there, and Alfred Collins and CJ West, who we believe both have upside when it comes to rushing the passer. But this is a bona fide pass rusher in the NFL with Bryce Huff. Now let's look at his career stats. And, it's a guy that really, besides the 1 year in 2023, really hasn't had a lot of production in his career. So he drafted in 2020. We know how difficult that was for all the players that came out in that draft. All the protocols, everything they had to deal with, it definitely made it more difficult for rookies to be able to translate to the game, no matter what position you were playing. But he played in 14 games. He didn't start any of those games, and he had 2 sacks. He did have 4 quarterback hits. So it was not a great start, but decent for a young rookie. He got to play in 14 games. In 2021, which is Robert Saleh's first year there, he ends up playing in 9 games and starts 7 of those. He had 2 sacks. So once again, he's playing for Saleh. His quarterback hits double. He goes up to 8. And that's one thing we've seen just in his stats when he played for Saleh. So in his rookie year, no Saleh, 4 quarterback hits. His first year playing for Robert Saleh, he only played 9 games, where his rookie season he played 14. And all of a sudden, he has 8 quarterback hits. He doubled. Then in 2022, he played in 14 games. He didn't start any of those, and he had 10 quarterback hits. So he's getting closer and closer to the quarterback. Then in 2023, he puts it together. He had played in 17 games. Okay, he's used mainly as a pass rush specialist. So let's remember that. This doesn't mean that on first and second down to start a game, you're going to see Bryce Huff playing opposite of Bosa. That's not a guarantee. It's still likely you're going to see Mikael Williams, or you're going to see Yetur Gross-Matos opposite Nick Bosa on first and second down. And then when you see third down, here comes Bryce Huff. That is going to be kind of more his role. I do think we'll see him from time to time on first, second, and third, the same way we did D Ford, depending on time of the game, right? If you have a offense that is in their 2-minute offense, you're going to see Bryce Huff. You see anytime that there is a second and long, you're going to see Bryce Huff. So there are going to be opportunities for him to get on the field, but I don't want anyone to look at Bryce Huff and say, you know what, this is the 3-down starter opposite of Nick Bosa, because I don't think that's how he's going to be used. He did play a lot of snaps for the Jets in 2023, but he did not start those games for the Jets. He came in the role that we're talking about, but he had 10 sacks. And this is where all of his numbers blew up. He had 10 sacks and 21 quarterback hits. So he definitely improved his stock. Now, last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, he played in 12 games. 6 of those games he started. He only had 2.5 sacks playing for them and only 4 quarterback hits. So it went down, pretty astronomically back to his rookie amount when talking about hits. So that's something to remember about Bryce Huff. Now, the thing is, though, Robert Saleh spent 3 seasons with him, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And so he has a very good understanding of who he could be. He also has an understanding of who he's developed to be. And he's worked with him extensively. So this is something that I like the 49ers adding him, a mid-round pick, but a specialist that can help. Because right now you do have Gross-Matos and you do have Mikael Williams, who are going to set a very firm edge. Now, Bryce Huff is not a small guy by any stretch. When you think, Hassan Reddick, you think an undersized edge rusher, right? You think a guy like James Pierce Jr. in the draft that Atlanta drafted, another guy that's a speed element off the edge, but, a little bit undersized. You're not getting that, from a guy like Bryce Huff. He's playing around 260 pounds at 6'3". This guy's got a lot of weight on him. He's pretty close to the same weight as Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos, and they have a couple inches on him. So this dude is put together when you're talking about size. He's also very athletic. He can run. And so you're getting a guy that can bring pressure off the edge consistently because he's got a natural get off, a good first step. He's got enough power to be able to win, against offensive tackles and be able to get a little bit of a bull rush, get that straight arm going. He has some talented moves, and just going over his film and watching him throughout the years, he's definitely been able to produce pressure off the edge. And he gives you enough athleticism to be able to do a lot of things. So let's talk about this guy a little bit and just what he's going to be able to do for this football team. He's got good handwork, but it was very basic coming out of college, so he had to develop that. And I think that he's shown that he has. The technique that he's continued to develop has gotten better and better and better. He looks more professional now than he ever did. And so you've got a technician who knows about leverage, knows how to use leverage. He's got the speed. He's got the athleticism. He definitely has the short area quickness and burst, agility to be a very solid edge rusher, especially in the 49ers wide 9, which is something that he fits well in. And that's part of it. When you are bringing players in, you need to make sure they fit your scheme. And Bryce Huff is a prototypical Robert Saleh guy, right? One of the interesting things that we've talked about in the process of the draft was guys who fit the Saleh scheme. And we talked about how Mikael Williams was very much a reminder of Jermaine Johnson, who the 49ers took, or I'm sorry, who the Jets took in the first round a few years ago. They took him out of Florida State. So they have Bryce Huff. They took Jermaine as well. And then you had those two guys rushing the passer. That's when Bryce Huff had a real good season. Well, now you put Bryce Huff with Bosa, with Mikael Williams, and it kind of just works. It's got a really good first step. That's something that we know that Chris Kasarik loves. So that's what you're going to see. He's able to get off the ball with suddenness. That is something I really like. He also plays with a good pad level. And that's one of the advantages of being 6'3". When you're not 6'5", and this is something that we've talked about with Nick Bosa in the past, he's not as tall, even as his brother or some of the other elite edge rushers in this league. It allows you to stay low and kind of play underneath the pad level of the offensive tackles, making it a little bit more difficult for them. He also has good bend. And on this channel, we talk about bend all the time when we're talking about edge rushers. That's something that Mikael Williams has to prove that he has. But he played a lot of 4-eye at Georgia and didn't have a lot of opportunities to prove he had bend. And I think that's a question mark. If Mikael Williams has more bend than we thought, he's going to be an all-pro player. If he has the bend that we think, he's going to have to win other ways. Well, Bryce Huff doesn't have to do that because he does have bend. He can win around the corner with speed rush. He's got a really good swipe move. He can win around the corner. And then he's got the flexible ankles and the bend and fluidity in his hips to be able to flatten out and get to quarterbacks. You see it extensively if you go and watch his film. He's somebody that wins, gets those hands off, and then is able to use his speed to get around that corner. And once he gets a step on an offensive tackle, they're in trouble, which helps him also when he uses his counter moves, because he does have counter moves that he's developed in his time in the NFL. He pushes them upfield, they overset in their kick slide, and then he works to the inside. Good job with wrist control. Sometimes he's willing to take them on with a little bit of a bull rush and then kind of come off of that with an underneath rip. So this dude's got some technical skills to his at his disposal that he can use, which I really like. And that allows him to kind of knife into gaps, especially on the inside, which leaves the 49ers open for a lot of opportunities for stunts, especially when you get into the NASCAR package. You have Gross Matos and Mikael Williams playing on the inside. Then you have Bryce Huff and Bosa on the outside. Where are these guys coming from? What kind of stunts are they running? And the whole time you're wondering about that, you've now added a lot of guys for the 49ers for Robert Saleh to be able to blitz. D. Winters, a great blitzer. Nick Martin, 6.5 sacks, a great blitzer. Upton Stout, a great blitzer. Jason Pinnock, a great blitzer. They have added guys that can finish at the quarterback no matter what position they're at. And I think that this is another one of those disruptive players that you're adding into the mix. The low center of gravity is something that I love. He plays underneath blocks. It does that at such a high level. But it's got to be the speed, that element that he's adding to this defense, that I'm really, really excited about. And I've seen him be able to hold up against some of the bigger offensive tackles. And I think that's always a concern when talking about a guy that's perceived to be smaller. Now, I don't think he's a small player by any stretch of the imagination. The only way he's smaller now, the way he's so twitched up and jacked up from how he works out, is just when it comes to height. But when it comes to weight, it's not. The other thing that he needs to get better at, and this is something that I think he illustrated in 2023, that I didn't see last year in 2024 film that I watched of him on the Eagles, is I felt like when he played for Robert Saleh, he had a better pass rush plan. He had a better way of attacking offensive tackles. And I think that plays into the scheme and what he was asked for to do for Saleh and what he was asked to do for, Vic Fangio and the Philadelphia Eagles defense. So I think that plan's going to get a little bit better. And I would love to see Bryce Huff kind of picking the brain of Nick Bosa. If ever there was a technician who has a great pass rush plan every single play, it's Bosa. And now if the 49ers, think about this, can get Bosa with some situations where he's just, singled up on an offensive tackle, that's a win. But imagine that. Who's going to get singled up? You can't double everyone. You double Bosa, then does that mean you leave Huff, one-on-one? That's scary. If you double up both guys, which you can do, that means you're leaving Yetur Gross-Matos, who, I get it, last year wasn't the best year, dealt with a knee injury, was in and out of the lineup, and I understand all that. But go back to what he did in 2023 playing for Carolina, where he had nearly 5 sacks on the inside, rushing the passer on obvious pass downs. And then last year he had 4 for the 49ers, even though he was in and out of the lineup. There could be an effective big-time jump for Yetur Gross-Matos. This is what they brought him in for, that Charles Omenihu ardent key role. And now Bryce Huff frees him up to do that. And you start looking at what this pass rush could look like moving forward, and it does look very 2019, doesn't it? And I don't want to get too far out on my skis, but I just want to talk about like the size and kind of the demeanor of some guys. You look at Bryce Huff, there's your D Ford guy, and D Ford's first step was unbelievable, but similar size and stature. You've got Bosa, and you've got a better version of Bosa than you had in 2019. Then you look on the inside, and you're going to have potential twin towers on obvious pass, right? You had Buckner before, now you have Mikael Williams. You had Armstead before, now you have Yetur Gross-Matos. Now, the Buckner and Armstead went, around 290 pounds. So you are about 30 pounds devoid, but you don't need that weight on the inside when you're rushing the passer on obvious third down. So I think that this is a way that the 49ers have built defense in the past, and they're doing it again. But I love the big dudes on the inside on rundowns, and then bringing in these guys that can absolutely get it done when it comes to rushing the passer on third down. So let's take a look at the depth real quick, because this did put a huge change in the 49ers, makeup of their defensive line. I talked earlier about the fact that you had Sam Okuwanu and Robert Beal Jr. potentially playing together, right? Beal Jr. playing on early downs, Okuwanu rushing the passer. And Okuwanu wasn't your, stud pass rusher, but he did have 3.5 sacks. He competes hard. He has a good motor. But now that changes. You've got Nick Bosa. You've got Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff, think of him as your designated pass rusher. He'll play a little bit more than that. Then you've got Gross-Matos, and you've got Mikael Williams. Now on the bubble, and I posted this on Twitter as well, on the bubble, Okuwanu and Robert Beal Jr. Somebody has to win that role. Who's it going to be? And I think this is a little bit more nuanced than just, hey, who's going to be the better player as the fifth guy? Because you have to take special teams into account as well. Robert Beal Jr. is the better special teams player than Sam Okuwanu. I believe right now Sam Okuwanu overall in totality is the better defensive end. But what will Robert Beal Jr. do now that he's going to have another opportunity? We've seen him get a lot better when it comes to setting the edge in the run game. That's something he's effective at. But we've seen no pass rush upside. Sam Okuwanu struggled when it came to stopping the run down the stretch. His run grade, it dipped almost under 50. It was not good. Now, his pass rush definitely was a lot better, 3.5 sacks. A lot of those, like I said, the motor, right? It's not an initial win. So this is going to become one of the most interesting competitions in 49ers training camp is Robert Beal Jr. versus Sam Okuwanu. But here's the good news. That's to see who's going to be defensive end number 5. That is what the 49ers have done. They added this offseason. I know they lost a couple of guys, right? You lose Leonard Floyd. That stinks. But when you start looking at the defensive end, and all of a sudden you go like this. We've got Nick Bosa. We've got Bryce Huff, who was a 10-sack guy 2 years ago. That's huge. So you add a guy that was a top free agent just last offseason. Then you add a top 11 pick with Mikael Williams. You have Yetur Gross-Matos, who you paid good money for during the offseason, and he was coveted. We remember there was 5 teams interested in Yetur Gross-Matos because of what he provided pass rush-wise. You've got those guys who are your 5th-round pick, Robert Beal Jr., and from a couple years ago, and Sam Okuwanu are competing. This turned the entire thing around. Then you look on the inside, and you've got Jordan Elliott, you've got Alfred Collins, C.J. West, Kevin Givens, Kalia Davis, and Evan Anderson. And one thing I want to say, and I get a lot of comments, and people will say, hey, you definitely can't keep Kevin Givens and let go Evan Anderson. Is remember that these guys play certain positions. And I'm not saying they're going to let go Evan Anderson, because I like Evan Anderson. I thought he played well last year stopping the run. But you did draft 2 guys in Alfred Collins and C.J. West who are not pure 3-tech players. The only pure 3-tech player you have on this roster is Kevin Givens. He is more of a pass rush, pure 3-tech player. And so they are different positions. So it's not like you're choosing Evan Anderson or you're choosing Kevin Givens. Kevin Givens has to prove he can stop the run a little bit, and Evan Anderson has to prove he can rush the passer a little bit. But they're not in direct competition to see who that guy is. 49ers have a decision to make there. And I think that they would probably right now err on the young guy and Evan Anderson. But it's going to be interesting. The 49ers are going to have absolute battles at defensive line, but this takes it to another level. And what about Robert Saleh adding his New York Jets guys? You've been bringing on guys. You got Bryce Huff, you got Surratt. You bring those guys in. That's huge. But it's not just that. Is they also brought in Jason Pinnock. And Pinnock is not always thought of a Robert Saleh guy because he played for the New York Giants over the last couple of years. But he was drafted by Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh did not want to lose Jason Pinnock. They waived him. They were trying to get him to the practice squad, and the Giants claimed him. So he's another Robert Saleh guy. And you see some of the players out there that are handpicked by coaching staff. They feel comfortable with these guys. This isn't the only one. You got a Dallas Flowers who played for the Indianapolis Colts. That's a Gus Bradley guy. They bring him in. So you're seeing some of these fingerprints on certain guys. Luke Gifford brought in by the Tennessee, former special teams coach, who's the assistant special teams coach in San Francisco. But I love this. Robert Saleh going and getting his guys. Brant Boyer going and getting his guys. Ray Brown going and making sure that he brings in Jacob Robinson to be a to be a secondary player that he feels comfortable with. So 49ers are continuing to do it. But Bryce Huff was a significant move. This is what they needed. And we talked about this a lot, that they needed, right? It made more sense for a guy like Von Miller than it made for a guy like, some of the other big-time defensive ends that you were going to have available. And, there were a lot of guys. I mean, we talked about this just a couple days ago, the guys that were going to be available if the 49ers needed to go edge. And they make a trade. And I think this is the best one because you're not going to make you're not going to pay a lot of money. You didn't want to pay Jadeveon Clowney over $10 million. You didn't want to pay Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith that kind of money. Matt Judon was out there, but he had a down year last year, and these guys are getting a little bit older. Bryce Huff is 27 years old. You still got a guy that you got control of him for 2 more years. He's still in the midst of his prime, and the other guys are all aging, and that's why they're still available. I think it was a dynamite move for the 49ers, and I'm excited for this thing to get finalized after June 1. Then we'll hopefully find out all the parameters. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think about the 49ers adding Bryce Huff and how will this set up the 49ers defense for the future. You're getting excited about 49ers football in 2025. I know I am. I'm ready for it to start. And Bryce Huff, Chaz Surratt, these guys are going to be big additions to the San Francisco 49ers. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.